All right, what's going on YouTube? My name is Sam Crockman. You may know me from TikTok in the infamous Will It Shift Knob series, where we turn random stuff into shift knobs for that car. If you haven't seen it, go check it out on TikTok. But today we're gonna do something a little different. We're actually gonna install an oil cooler on the Z. Those oil temps get way too hot out here in Arizona, so hopefully we fix that. And I'm gonna take you guys along. And if you like the YouTube stuff, we'll keep doing it. If not, we'll do just TikTok, and that's all right too. So I'm gonna take you along for the ride. Let's go. We just got back from the car wash, so the Z is nice and clean, ready for us to do some work and probably get it dirty, but that's all right. So let me show you what I got over here. All right, so over here, first we got our package from Z1 Motorsports. I'll show you that in a little bit. We got our tools, got some oil because we're gonna be doing an oil change as well at the same time, our jack and jack stands, and some water to stay hydrated because hydrate or dehydrate. Like I mentioned, we're also going to be changing the oil on the Z while we install the cooler. So first we're going to get it on jack stands, take off the front bumper, take off the service plate, and we'll go from there. All right, check this out. My jack just barely clears underneath it to get the car up. That is hilarious.
Having a lowered car is awesome a lot of the times, but then when it comes to jacking it up, it becomes sort of a struggle. Making sure that the jack is actually under the frame rail is super important, obviously not to rip a hole right through the bottom of your car. But once we had it in the right spot, we could get it all jacked up and then slide under our jack stand to make sure that this car was not going anywhere while we were working underneath it.
All right, so we got the car up on stands. Some things to know. One, you always want to make sure your handbrake's on and that you're in gear if you have a stick. Also, something I really like to do that makes me a lot more comfortable, we have both stands under here, but when it comes to the jack, I like to jack the jack back up until it's just barely touching it. Apply just like a little bit of a pump just so that there's some force on there, and that will just ensure that it's not going to come down on you. All right, so next thing we're going to do is take off the front bumper and the service tray, and to do that, we're going to have to open up the hood, so let's get started. All right, so with the hood up, the things we got to remove all of these pop clips, we got to remove some of this facial stuff here, and then under the car, all of these little 10 millimeters holding on the bottom tray and the front of the bumper. So those are all going to come off too. So let's get to work. I know they make a special tool for this, but I don't have one. So we're going with the good old screwdriver. That's all of them from the top. So we got the whole service panel removed. We also have all of the top pieces removed. Lastly, to pull off the bumper, we have to come in here. There's a pop clip here. There you go, pop clip there. There's also a nut up here I gotta undo, and then the bumper will be free to come undone. There we go. Got the front bumper off. There are two clips that go right into the running lights there. I couldn't film it because I don't have 10 hands, and but just know if you go and pull off your bumper, if you got lights, you're most likely gonna have to unclip these. All right, so here's what came in the package from Z1 Motorsports. So we're gonna take it apart and I'll kind of tell you what everything does. So first up, we got our bag of hardware. This is how we're gonna mount the oil cooler to the car. Next, we got our sandwich plate. Now, I got the thermostatic one, and what that means is that it won't actually start sending oil through the oil cooler until it gets up to temp. There is an option to get a non-thermostatic, and essentially that means that it will be always cooling your oil, but that's really only for race applications, and I really need it for street use. Next, we got our Braided A-N Lines, so we're gonna be using this to go between the oil cooler and the sandwich plate. And then lastly, we got the oil cooler itself. I got the 34 row. It's the largest they have because I know I'm gonna need to suck out a lot of heat. This looks a lot smaller when it's out of the box, but this is gonna do a lot to help keep our oil temps down.
But it was getting dark and mosquitoes were out for blood, so we closed up the car so we could continue working on it the next day.
The next morning.
To start off the next morning, we brought the oil cooler itself inside on the counter so that we could get all the hardware attached to it. Thankfully, Z1 Motorsports includes some pretty solid instructions on how to put it together, but me being me, I still managed a way to mess it up and had to take it apart and reassemble it, but it wasn't a big deal. It all went together pretty good, and we got everything tightened up, but it was ready to be put into the car and filled with oil so we can move on to the next step.
Now that we've got the oil cooler looking like the picture, we're gonna take it outside and we'll throw it in the car. All right, so we got the car back up on jack stands. The next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna actually take off this aluminum crash bar. It's gonna give us a lot more area to look around here. You don't need to do it, but it'll also help you guys see better what I'm doing and just give us a little more access. So we're gonna get out our breaker bar, break this thing loose, get it off, and we'll go from there.
And with the crash bar out of the way, we could finally mock up the oil cooler for the first time and make sure it fit, and good news that it does. Next, we had to install these little clips. These are gonna have the threads that we need in order to screw the bolts on and through the oil cooler to make sure it's secured. Turns out they were not as easy to push on as I originally thought, so with a little bit of negotiation with a wrench, they snapped into place and we were ready to bolt in the oil cooler. We first only bolted in the 2 bottom bolts because that lined up the 3rd bracket to the midsection where we needed to mark a hole to start drilling. So we just used the drill bit to actually make the little mark, pulled it off, and then we can go ahead and drill the final size hole. Being careful not to hit the radiator right behind it, because last thing we want to do is put a hole right through our radiator. With the car all ready to go, we can now prep our oil cooler itself. We start by removing these little plastic pieces on top that give us access to the inside so that we can pre-fill the oil cooler with some oil. It takes a little under a quart, so just get 1 little quart to fill it up. From there, we can screw in the supplied A-N line fittings into the oil cooler. When you tighten them, make sure they're snug, but don't over tighten it too much because all these components are made out of aluminum and we don't want them to strip. Then you can move on to the next side, and this piece just has to be screwed in because we already filled it with oil. Then it is ready to be put into the car and get bolted up.
Alrighty, so at this point we've got the bracket bolted here and here. We've got it bolted once more here, and so this thing is super sturdy, not going anywhere. So the next thing we gotta do is get the A-N lines hooked up onto here, then we'll route them left through here, back through somewhere over here. I still gotta figure that out, and then it goes down below the car, over to the oil pan where the oil filter is, and then we're getting close to done. So we'll get those screwed on next. Alright, so included in the kit there are 2 A-N lines. You can tell one of them is longer than the other. That one's going to mount to the right side on the driver's side of the car, and because that's got a little bit farther distance to go. So we're going to go ahead and get these screwed on.
Now with the lines hand tightened onto their fittings, we can start to route the lines themselves. Z1 Motorsports supplies a lot of zip ties for you, and it's really helpful keeping the lines all together and helps routing them a bunch. Next, under the car, there is a bracket that we have to install. It's not that one, unfortunately, it's the one behind it. There you go. And it needs that little white spacer there in the middle so lines can route between it and the frame rail. Also, this plastic piece on the front does need to be modified. We need to take off this top portion of it so that there is room for those lines to route. But then it gets snapped back on.
Alright, so after messing with this for quite some time, I got the lines connected there. They are routing this way. In the pictures, they look like they're supposed to route around here, but there was no way there was going to be any room for that. So they're coming around here, and let me take you underneath the car. So you can kind of see they're coming up from there in the top. They come around here, cross over, and now they are right here next to where the oil filter is where they're supposed to be. So what we're going to do now, we're actually going to drain the oil out of the car. Then we're going to take off the oil filter. Then we'll start dealing with the sandwich plate, get these all hoses connected up right, and then we're all going to actually be almost done. Alright, so we have the sandwich plate sort of mocked up and where it's going to go. The instructions say it needs to be about 7 o'clock, and so that these fittings essentially have to come down, screw onto here, and then come around this way. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work yet. We're just going to mess around with it, and then I'm going to finish it, and then I'll come back, tell you how it went, and kind of all the problems I ran into, because I know there will be plenty. Alright, so I think I might have actually done it right. As you can tell, I am absolutely drenched in sweat. I'm covered in oil. Yeah, it's been crazy, but let me show you what I did, and yeah, let me just show you. Alright, so we got the sandwich plate mounted. This centerpiece is what holds it in. It's kind of like an extension of the actual threads that hold
the oil filter on, and now I sort of understand what they mean by having it at the 7 o'clock position. So that's about where it's at. It's supposed to come right here next to this frame rail, not actually supposed to touch it. And then the oil lines feed up that way, and so there is enough room for the oil filter here, so it worked out good. So next, I think I need to tighten up all of these lines. We'll get the oil filter screwed on. We'll tighten up all of the lines that are up on the actual cooler itself. And then from there, I think we're good to start filling it up with some oil. So, man, this has been a long process.
All right, guys, so we have the sandwich plate mounted, the lines mounted to the sandwich plate. We got the oil filter installed. We follow the lines out here. They come out here, come around here. They go into the oil cooler. Those are tight, all of those are tight. We have no oil in the engine, so we got to fill it up with oil. But after that, I think we are going to turn on the car, check for leaks, and if we're all good to go, then we can finally button all of this back up, and we are going to be done. So I'm going to fill it up with oil, come take a look, and then we'll start up the car. First, we're going to pour what's left over out of this container. Okay guys, so we got the oil cooler installed, lines going through, they're all routed, they're all tight. We now have new oil inside the car, inside the engine. We got our drain plug tightened, so now we are ready to turn on the car and check for leaks. So here we go. Okay guys, so far so good. I can feel the heat inside the oil filter, so I know there's oil flowing through there as the car was warming up.
Now here I went on to explain that I didn't think I was going to be able to check for any leaks in the lines until the car was fully up to temperature. This was because we bought the thermostatic sandwich plate, which isn't supposed to open until the car is fully up to temp. However, what the actual case is that the thermostatic sandwich plate is always open, but just a little bit, and opens fully when the car is all the way up to temperature. This meant that oil was in fact flowing through the lines, and after a few minutes, I could feel the heat going through, which was an awesome sign because we saw no leaks, so the car was ready to be put back together. But not without first doing a couple revs. So now it's time to do the whole process but in reverse, and something that never ceases to amaze me is how well these Japanese cars are made. Every time I've taken off this bumper and put it back on, it always went on just as well as it was from factory. I've got a buddy with a Mustang, and every time we take off a piece from his car, it always breaks and never goes on quite the same. But we got the car off its jack stands and back on the ground and closed up the hood, which meant this job was done and the oil cooler was installed. All right, so about a week has passed and we've tested out the oil cooler. Let me tell you how it went. So since we put on the oil cooler, we have put on about 1,200 miles. Let me just spoil it for you right now. This oil cooler works so well. Take a look at this video I recorded. Okay guys, so we are in the Z and we are driving on the freeway. It is currently 103 degrees out, okay? So just keep that in mind. I'm driving at 80 miles an hour at 3,700 RPM, and currently my oil temps are not even past 190 yet. That is how well this oil cooler is working. Let me show you. We are going at 3,700 RPM, 80 miles an hour here on the freeway, and look at these oil temps. They are staying so cool, and there you go, look at that, 102 degrees outside. So this oil cooler, if I was driving like this without the oil cooler, I'd easily be seeing 230 degrees. So this thing is absolutely ripping, and this is a game changer. So yes, as you can see, this oil cooler was definitely necessary for my car, and it's just, I'm so happy with it. I mean, look at this, after a half hour of driving on the freeway at 80 miles an hour, I'm at 195. 195, that's it. And these 1,200 miles that I put on the car in the last week, 700 of those were a road trip I had to make back to California from Arizona and then come back to Arizona. So for 6 hours twice, I had to drive straight at 80 miles an hour, 3,700 RPM, in at sometimes 110 degree weather. And I never saw temps above 210 degrees, which is absolutely crazy. If I tried doing that without my oil cooler, I would have easily gone past 260 and went into limp mode, and overall that would not have been good for my car. As you guys saw, when we changed the oil, that oil was cooked and it only had 4,000 miles on it, and that's just because it always got so hot, and I have never seen temps above 220 with this oil cooler. And so this is going to be huge in increasing the life of my oil, increasing the life of my engine, just because these VQ motors, they do not cool very well, and out here in Arizona in the heat, and also higher RPMs because my new final drive gear that I installed, you know, it was absolutely necessary, and I could not be more happy with how this Z1 Motorsports Oil Cooler is doing. So yep, I love it. And guys, this is gonna be the first video on the YouTube channel, so let me know your thoughts. I love criticism, so if you think there's something I should do better, just tell me. Also, if I'm gonna post more videos, let me know what I should post. I'm thinking about doing some videos, maybe some more like engineering explain type stuff, like how my final drive gears work and how that all got installed. I can teach you guys how to drive stick. I can do like a how to drive manual tips and tricks type video, so just let me know. But thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I had a blast making this YouTube video, and so yeah, I hope you liked it, and let me know. But I'm gonna end it here, so check out all the links I put in the description. Check it out. We also have some of our official Will It Shift Knob merch. They're on the website. That link will be in the top link in the description, so take a look at that. Also, if you don't follow me on TikTok, you can check that out, see all the shift knobs we're making. We're having a great time. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.